this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 908. Gary's here, Richard's on holiday, but Gary's here, and we've got lots to talk about. We feel quite a few new builds, and I think we're seeing the emerging of 23H2, or what the final feature set will be for the next update for Windows 11. Gary's got a rant. Richard's not here, but Gary's got a rant. We'll be talking EVs, music tech, and other stuff. So let's get straight to Gary. Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, and as if by magic,
there'll be light.
Yes, fantastic. So no Richard this week. He's on a holiday. He said he's in deepest, darkest Wales where there's no signal. But yeah, I think that I've been there, and it's probably right. There is not a lot of signal in some of these places. He's relaxing. I think he doesn't need signal. He's relaxing.
Yeah.
But it's good we had a great show last week. We really enjoyed that chat with Richard Hay last week.
Oh, that was brilliant. Yeah, it's great to see Richard. Always good to hear him. And it was really interesting, the stuff he's been working on. So that was really good.
Yeah, it is. So we've got a few pieces this week. We've got some build stuff. I've got to talk about a device that I showed. I didn't talk about it last week, but looked at it that I put on the YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to catch up with you on some of the EV news as well. And we had quite a few builds as well, because we had kind of a break of builds, and now we're back with builds again. So so quite a lot of things to talk about. So first thing I want to mention is builds. So we've not had we had a long gap with builds. So we didn't talk about it last week, but we did get a big change with the Canary channel last week, or the week before last. Let me share my screen. I'm using the new Teams, and it doesn't have the share button anymore when you hover over a window like you do with the old the old one. Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, we got 25905, which is Canary channel build, and this has switched from the ZM release to RS pre-release, which means that the features are back. So when they switch to Canary, they changed the branch to the ZM release branch, which doesn't have always the new features. And they've done this a few times now. I think when they're testing out these new builds, that for a while they put them on the release branch, and then the pre-release has the features in. So we got a pre-release build last week, and really it was a question of more of them catching up with the features that the dev build has had, because we mentioned a few times, why does everything arrive in the dev when Canary is supposed to be the future one? Well, anyway, that's kind of caught up now. So we had this build a couple of weeks ago, and there was a few bits and pieces in there, but they were really just catching up. So it had the backup tool was in there that we talked about a few weeks ago, which backs up to the cloud. It had, I think, some of the gallery settings, the gallery that was in the photos, that gives you photos from OneDrive, that was in there, and the new file manager as well. So the file explorer, file manager, that's going back to Windows 3 days, but yeah, file explorer. So so it's good to see those catch up. Oh, new emojis as well. Everybody loves the emojis. So finally, the Canary channel is catching up and getting new builds or new features with builds. So we did have that a couple of weeks ago, but we also had a build on the dev channel, which we've not had any dev channels for a while, and we had a build last week, last Thursday, which was 23506, and that one had quite a few new features in it, and actually some of them have already come to the beta channel, which we'll talk about later. But I don't know if you've seen, you've got the new file sharer, which it looks a bit more like Windows 11 now than the other one was just got Windows 10 UI. I don't know if you noticed, but it looks more Windows 11 now. That's the design of that. They've changed some of the out-of-box setup, and they've changed. Copilot's now available to all Windows Insiders as well, so it's not just a few test users. They've added some new emojis, the backup and restore. Did you know there was a second chance of out-of-box experience? called SCOBY.
No, I didn't.
This was new to me in this build. There's you can now, your backup preferences are can be configured in the second chance out of box experience, which they call SCOBY, which I think is great. So this is where you might have seen this. This is where at some point you get prompted to continue setting up your PC. When you build a new machine, you may have skipped over some of the settings in the initial, and then it prompts you again at some point in the later, and that's the SCOBY. So now you know, now it's a second chance, and it now lets you do your cloud backups as well in SCOBY mode. So there was some other energy saving settings, and there was some file explorer settings as well. So it's good to see it was good to see the dev channel get a build, which I think it's been 3 or 4 weeks for between dev channel builds. I think they had their 4th of July, and then there was some other stuff, so they had a bit of time between those. So so it was good to see them, and I did do a build video for that as well. But also I noticed yesterday, I should say 24th, as we record on Tuesday evenings, there was a new beta channel build, 22361 with the features, or 22621 and without the features, and that introduced quite a number of features, some of which we've seen already. So this one here, the File Explorer, the modern File Explorer. What's the platform it's built on? Is it WinUI 3 or something like that?
WinUI, yeah. WinUI 3, yeah. So I think that's what it's built on anyway.
Yeah. So is that's available for all developers now, isn't it, through the .NET platform?
Yes. Yeah.
So I guess they've rebuilt this now in that, using that platform.
Yeah, I guess so. They haven't definitely said that as far as I can see.
Yeah.
But it looks like it. I mean, it certainly looks like that UX.
Well, you should notice they've moved the file address bar up to the top there, and the search on the right hand side. Actually, it is quite nice. I don't think I can show you real time because the virtual machines take up too much memory. So I'll give it a try, but I don't think I should have started it before I loaded all the browser tabs up. It works that way around, not the other way. But anyway, and you've got your recommended section on recommended section there. You've got your favorites. Now I haven't got a free RAM left with all the recording and stuff. So it's better. It's certainly an improvement, but not everybody got this new UI. It was for some beta testers, or some testers on the dev channel, but not everybody got it. But now in the beta channel, everyone's got it. So there was quite a lot of changes with this. There was the new pen input, so you can use the start. You can write into the to say settings.
Have you tried that, Ian? Because that works incredibly well. I was really surprised how well that works.
No, I haven't tried that because my actually I could try it on my Surface Go, couldn't I? I haven't tried it because I've been doing all my testing on virtual machines. So even though I'm on the Surface Laptop Studio with pen support, it doesn't pass through to the virtual machine. So I haven't tried that, but I've got the Surface Go on the dev channel, so I need to give that a try. They put the Windows new sound mixer that we talked about a few builds ago. That's in there now. Dynamic lighting APIs are in these builds now. The share icon, the Windows share is this one that I just showed you before. So that's been improved. The unsafe password copy protect warnings are in. So actually there was a huge amount of changes in this beta build, which is feeling like a 23H2 update now. So these things are all coming together now. There's the new properties in File Explorer. These are all things that we've seen over the last few months, but they're all starting to make their way into this. Spotlight improvements as well. Passwordless improvements if you're using AAD. New voices, file sharing. You see, there's a huge amount of changes. New emojis. You can name your desktops, I think. So yeah, a lot of changes with these builds, and I think this is effectively now 23H2 getting ready. So I suppose it's in beta channel now. So the next thing is when it hits release preview, we'll know that's 23H2 ready to go. It can't be far off now. So anyway, so that's coming. So all these features that are shown on here have all covered in previous build videos, but this is the first time we've seen them together into one beta release. So I expect, I don't know, October time frame, something like that, which means that this will get signed off in September. So maybe it'll hit release preview September, something like that. We used to get a bit of a lull in the summer while they're doing builds, but yeah, this is the one. And then I think that then the focus will be on the next Windows development, whether it be Windows 12 or Windows 11 24H1, which is what effectively the dev channel's on. But it seems to me that I think dev channel at the moment is just all these 23H2 features tested there, then moved to here, and then they'll be release preview. But they are nice. I do like the File Explorer. It is definitely an improvement over the current one in Windows 11. So that was good to see. So lots of testing to be done there. So that's when a machine like this Surface laptop is really handy, because I've got all these virtual machines set up, so I can do the testing, because there aren't enough. I haven't got enough hardware devices left. I think I've actually got one on the beta channel with the pen, so I could actually try that. But yeah, I have all my virtual machines set up on there. Okay, so I think that was all the build news I had this week. There was another article I did want to mention as well. I did it a couple of weeks ago. I've been, like I said, looking back at some of my music technology that I've got, and really just trying to get the most out of them by spending time with them, really. And so this was one of the last ones to do that I hadn't already done anything with. This is my Korg Minilogue, and so I've written a full article on how to use that and everything else. But actually, this one is not one that has been I've had for a long while and has been kept on the shelves and not that spent that much time with. This one I actually use all the time. So this is, I think I got this in 2016. So this is my, definitely one of my favorites. So this is a proper analog synth, 2016, but it's a proper old school analog synth, 4-voice analog. It's got really nice warm sounds on it, and step sequence and that kind of thing. It's a really nice synth. So yeah, you can check out the video on that. But they're about £400 now if you buy them new, but they are really nice warm sounds. So have a look at the video and you can see what I'm talking about on that. And I should tell you later about the other thing that might be arriving here, maybe in time for next week's show. Before I go on to that, though, I wanted to catch up with you on the EV news, and we know Richard's on his way into Wales with his range anxiety. But we haven't talked EVs for a few weeks on the show.
Yeah, so I mean, there's quite a bit going on at the moment. We've got the hybrid solid state batteries, which is a kind of new thing which hasn't really been mentioned much before. So there's been all this talk about solid state batteries going forward, and solid state batteries are great, but they're difficult to produce in high quantities, and I think we'll see them more in phones and the like before we see them in EVs. But what a couple of manufacturers are doing is a kind of combination between a solid state and a liquid battery, which has some of the advantages of solid state: faster charging, better battery density, but also cheaper and easier to produce, and actually mass producible. And we're going to start seeing some of these within a year, from all accounts. So some of the big Chinese companies, say SAIC and BYD, and that are all working along these lines. And the first ones which are coming out are predicted to have around about 400-mile range, right, and probably twice as quick charging as they currently have. Because obviously the solid state, the real advantage of the solid state is you don't get the dendrite forming. You can charge at higher temperatures. So a lot of the stuff which is a problem for fast charging goes away. So it should mean that you can keep a high charge rate across the whole range of charging, potentially, for the whole battery. So that will speed up the overall charge rate on it. And also you can possibly go more times charging, as in sort of so the amount of energy you can get into a battery might be able to get it in quicker than you currently can. even at base rate. So with higher rate charges, so obviously there's not all that many of them around, but potentially if you've got 350 kilowatt charges, you might be able to charge a battery for a couple hundred mile range in 15 minutes or so. That's the sort of the thing to talk about. And this battery development is ongoing. I mean, we know that the batteries are going to get cheaper. They're going to get less less heavy for more energy density. And as batteries get lighter, that has a knock-on effect as well. I mean, because obviously efficiency of a vehicle is partly based on its weight and how much it's got to move. If you actually get a lighter battery pack, you can move with better efficiency, which means your range goes up even if the battery pack gets slightly smaller.
Right. Yes, because you're not going to move the weight of the batteries.
Yeah. You're not going to. So it's technically feasible that you could actually have a car with which nowadays needs a 80 kilowatt battery. Let's say have a 50 or 60 kilowatt battery. But because it's lighter, the efficiency goes up enough to make that work. So
that then takes less time to charge because it's a smaller battery.
Or a smaller battery, yeah. So there's a lot of advantages for slightly smaller batteries. So going for bigger and bigger batteries sizes is not necessarily the right way to go. Now what a lot of the companies are doing, because of the profit margins involved, they are going for bigger battery packs and going for these big massive figures on mileage. And it's because that's what their surveys and everything is telling them people want. And because if you talk to one of the sticking points for a lot of people is, I want to drive 600 miles, I want to drive 800 miles. Whatever the range we actually get in these cars, it'll never be enough. But the key thing is really fast charging. If you can charge in 5 minutes, that's quicker than a petrol station stop. And in a lot of cases, that's all you would need to do with some of these high density balanced batteries to get to the next charging stop in a reasonable amount of time. And you wouldn't be stopping that long. It'd be similar to a petrol or diesel car could do. So I think there's some definite things happening there. But one of the interesting things when you start talking about these energy densities, and it will only get better, and over time we'll start seeing 1,000-mile batteries in a reasonable small space, and efficiency will be high, and charging rates will be good. Do we actually need as many chargers as we think we need now? So this is one of the conundrums out there. It's one of the problems for the people putting the investment into the charging network. At the moment, we need a lot of chargers. We need to fit to actually. I mean, this last weekend was a prime example, being school holidays break up and everybody's going off and going and most charging using one, and people having to put marshals into queuing at the the services. And as we've mentioned on the show before, services are one of the worst places to have chargers because getting power to them is difficult. They're using the middle of nowhere, actually running chuck cave. I mean, it's not so much that there isn't the power to get to them; it's actually getting the power over the land to get to them. You've got to get all the permissions from the landowners to put
wayleave, I think it's called.
Wayleave is the word. Yes.
Yes, I've got stuck with wayleaves in the past, so yes, it's not very easy to get round.
No, wayleaves is a challenge. So that's the big challenge, and it's just not enough power at most of those services. I mean, we've had some of the services like Leicester actually having to turn off the chargers because the service station was the services themselves were running out of power and they weren't able to cook dinner for people, which is obviously a technical problem. So I think there are definite challenges around getting chargers, and it's a lot of investment getting the wayleaves and everything else. It's a huge amount of money to get that in. And do you make that investment for what is probably going to only be 5 years of profitability on them? And it's a real trade-off. And it's one of the reasons they're expensive at the moment, because I think people have realised that they need a big profit margin on to pay back that in such a short time. And then after that, we're going to get to the point where if people will be able to charge at home and top up the batteries, they may need one charge in a journey rather than two, possibly on. We will need far more infrastructure in terms of charging actually at destinations. I think that's the way to go. But we'll probably have cars quite capable of doing the summer holiday trip on one charge and not having to stop en route. And then you just have to make sure you do you'd end up doing a sort of 2, 3, 4 day charge at home, but perhaps overnight on cheaper rate electricity. But you would be able to do that if you've got power home. And then the issue is, what do we do about the people who haven't got on-street parking, off-street parking, who've only got on-street parking? Where do we get charging for there? So you've got things like the lamppost charging, you've got street A lot of people are looking at street park charging. Or do you have some local high speed hubs that people can do? Because cities and towns usually have lots of power and don't have quite so many problems with wheelings. So it's an interesting dilemma at the moment, because the battery technology is only going to get better. And if we look at what's happening on battery technology, it's following very similar patterns to Moore's law on computing. The sort of density gets sort of kind of doubles, and you could see a path to where, particularly if we started building, because obviously one of the things which has been talked about is once you get your batteries really safe, which they could be with their solid state, they don't have the problems with battery fires and all that stuff that we talk about. You could start building the car what they call structural batteries. You can start building the body of the car as the battery, rather than it being a sort of like separate add-on onto the vehicle. And then you start talking about huge amounts of electricity you can put into that bodywork, because it can be much bigger sort of space taken up, because again you've got the weight balance. You're replacing a weighting material with another weighting material, so you can put you're not worrying quite so much about the weight. And there are predictions that with battery density going up 100-fold, allowing you sort of 10 times the amount of space to fill on the car as well, you could take currently a 300-mile range battery, multiply by that by 100, you've got a 30,000-mile battery. so I mean that's, and once you get to that sort of level, you're talking about, you buy the car fully charged. It's charged in the factory of a massive input. You buy it fully charged, you never charge it again, and when it gets low on power, you hand it back for a new car, or you rent your cars, and that's how it works in the future. So yeah, and the economics of that become interesting, how that all works. But that is potentially technically feasible, to have something like that where you have a vehicle which has got that sort of range. There are lots of challenges to be done, but certainly some of the experimental batteries and things are moving in that direction, and that's probably 20 years away. But even so, anybody who's doing these sort of investments in major infrastructure is looking for that return over 10, 15, 20 years. You've got that trade-off, which is why I think we definitely need more government intervention. Now, one big bit of definite government intervention which has happened in the last month since we last spoke is the new laws around chargers have come into place. So manufacturers now have to ensure that their chargers are up 99% of the time. That's now by law. The regulations on charging equipment have to do that, which is going to be huge, because most of them aren't. There's an awful lot of charging.
So they can't have one that's sat there, doing, not working correctly, and
Yeah. So the 99% availability is what they've been asked for. There's obviously the contactless payment stuff we've talked about before, but there's a lot of new bits in this regulation: clear pricing, integration with backend systems, so that they can be shared between providers. So there's a lot of good stuff in the regulations. There's some stuff missing from it. It's got slightly watered down as these things do, but it's a good start. Certainly reliability is one of the key things, because I very rarely have range anxiety. I do have charging anxiety, because the number of chargers that are out of operation is noticeable at the moment. It's got worse in the last years. And that's because the incentive is not there to maintain them. The incentives are there to install them. There's lots of grants and things to go and get your capital grants and install stuff, especially from councils. There's no revenue grants, so maintaining them becomes a problem. And it's certainly a lot of the first generation chargers are installed are failing left, right, and centre. So we definitely needed these regulations to come in to stop that being the case. So that's good news. That's good to see that. What else I can do? In other news, my car's going in for a service bulletin tomorrow, which is going to apparently increase its ability to have range. So just tweaking the battery
software update that gets you more range.
Preconditioning and planning, which is interesting. The other thing it's doing is it's actually adding battery heating for when I go to a charger, so that'll help with the charge speed, because that's because people talk about charge speeds as being limited by heat, but a lot of the time they're actually limited by cold as well. So as our winters get colder, which they seem to be at the moment, charging is a it becomes more of a problem, because if you've got a cold battery, it will take longer to start charging, because it has to warm the battery up first to get to a certain point before it can actually get energy into it. It's a fine balance. You don't want to be too hot, you don't want to be too cold. And this has changed over time, but my original, when I had the iPace, the battery on that needed to be around about 24 degrees before it would actually start charging at any speed. And it didn't want to be above 30. And it's sort of a very small window of charging. And that's, not all cars have the ability to preheat the batteries. And in certainly in some European climates, so sort of when you go Scandinavian countries, that becomes a real issue. And you think now it'd be something that should be unsolved, with Norway being the biggest EV market.
Yeah, because it's one of the top markets, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, more. I mean, definitely, it's getting to the point in Norway now where petrol cars and diesel cars are the odd ones out, rather than the EVs being the odd ones out. You go on the roads, you see more. So yeah, it's all happening. Yeah.
I see Robert Llewellyn post a few rants recently about what about some of these Tory, I say Tories, but let's say MPs, or pushing for, or trying to frame the banning of petrol and diesel engine cars in 2030 as anti-competitive or woke, or trying to frame it in a way, and he was quite upset by it. I read his article. I'll try and make sure I dig it out. He wasn't very pleased with it.
Probably rightly so, to be honest. I think there's I don't get into the politics of things, but I think the science is pretty hard and fast on this stuff. And yes, there are reasons why EVs are not as green as you'd like them to be at the moment, but they are still way greener than any petrol or diesel car. And you see a lot of the comparisons don't take into account things like the cost of actually the green. So one of the comparisons like I often see quoted is the energy, the pollution cost of actually producing an EV against the production cost of producing a car. And absolutely true. EVs do cost a little bit more than probably sometimes twice as much in terms of green and of pollution cost in terms of actual production. But if you produce them using green energy, and that's starting to be the case in a lot of places, then that goes down rapidly. That can get better. What can't get better is the amount of pollution that a petrol or diesel car will produce over its lifetime. And just taking those two facts together, just taking the production cost and the pollution over lifetime, there is a return point in any vehicle's life where the EV becomes greener than the petrol or diesel car. And depending on which car it is, between 10 and 15,000 miles to 20,000, 30,000 miles. But if it's produced in a particularly bad polluting country with coal-fired generators and things like that. But there's a couple of other things which are slightly problematic with that discussion. One, if it is a coal-fire generator, they often have pollution filters built into them, so they're not spewing out all the pollution. Cars don't have pollution filters built into them, so cars are always so the pollution is localized with the generators. It's not localized with cars and things. So there's a lot of stuff around there. But on the other hand, there is definitely a reasonable suggestion that we should keep. If you've got a vehicle which is not overly polluting, keeping it on the road longer is probably a better thing than buying a new car. In some ways,
scrapping a good car.
Scrapping things is not necessarily a good thing. But I think we should really try and move in when we can. Now, the other thing which doesn't come in that equation, which I've just quoted, and it's the one I've seen quoted a lot. Rowan Atkinson had an article which was generally very good in lots of talks, because it did mention the fact of not scrapping stuff and things like that. But it was quoting some out of date figures and out of date stuff which was quoted, and misquoting some stuff as well. Although I can understand why it's misquoting it, because it came from people like Volvo who had got the figures and got them out there. And they were talking about the manufacturing costs of the cars in terms of CO2, etc. But what wasn't being taken into account in any of these articles is the manufacturing cost of petrol and diesel in terms of CO2 generation. I mean, they only talk about the tailpipe emissions when they talk about the cost and the lifetime cost of the car. If you start taking into account the emissions of actually creating the petrol and diesel in the first place, then it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
And so it's, yeah, I mean, I get that there is an economic cost in this, and it's really difficult to get people to move and change with a stick. Sticks never really work. If you try and beat people to make people change by force or by regulation, you often get revolution against that, because it's really difficult to do that, and people don't. And not everybody understands the reasoning, and it's easy to push back against the reasoning with false facts. And this is fact-check stuff which Bobby did and Quentin did. He's very good in covering a lot of those issues. But what we don't seem to be having at the moment is the incentives. There's no carrot as opposed to the stick. And I think we need to do more carrot than stick. Especially because people will never do anything. So we are, by nature, we're short-termist. We don't tend to see the long big picture. If it doesn't affect me today, then okay, I can wait till next week to think about it. And that's just where we are, most people. So yeah, but the other thing I would say is, if you are buying a new car, test drive an EV, regardless of what you think about the green agenda, because I think you'll find now that the driving experience is just way better, other than the lack of noise, which I get. Some people like the noise, but everything else about an EV is just a better driving experience.
I just don't get and I can see why people like Robert Llewellyn get annoyed. I don't understand the politicizing of the issue. It's not a political issue. You're not being woke by buying an electric car. You're just buying it because it's what's best for you. I think what happens, I guess it's not just it's in all areas of life now, isn't it? With politics, is people tend to get so polarized about these things without. I mean, I like my petrol car, and I may get another petrol car, but it doesn't mean to say I will get an electric car in the future, and I don't like them now. It doesn't matter. It's just I'm not polarized to one or the other. It's just what these current circumstances are. And I think if you get drawn into that, they'll never do this, and I'll never do. That's not the. You need to be pragmatic about these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strange to see these, but I wonder. I guess the traditional car companies with their investment in and I suppose it's not even car companies. I guess it is a lot of it's down to the fuel makers, isn't it? They're the ones that are the biggest vested interest in all this, that perhaps happy to promote a bit of spin that maybe that is against electric cars because it suits them, and it's in the same way that electric vehicle manufacturers will also perhaps want to a bit of a campaign against petrol, but it does. I just, the only thing I think is are the European car companies, the traditional car companies, catching up now with the Chinese manufacturers, or are they still behind? And is it the issue that the batteries are all made in China, so that's why there's a difference, or is it just the European cars just manufacturers being slow to catch up?
I think we're slow to catch up, but that I mean, in some ways, that's never being second mover isn't always a bad thing. I mean, China has obviously invested a lot in old technology batteries. So there's a lot of lithium-ion battery production plants. Yes, they are moving ahead. But if someone in Japan or in Germany had a quantum leap and actually had that leap ahead and to get, say, a solid state battery in full production, then that's a completely different type of production plant, and they could jump that market. And then if it comes an argument of, okay, I can buy a 400 mile car from China, but I could buy a 2,000 mile car from Germany, which one you're going to buy. So that's where it's difficult to do it. But at the moment, they are the traditional car manufacturers are losing ground hand over foot to China. In that, and it's happening in a lot of markets. I mean, you have to remember that the Chinese market, it was the gold mine for most of these car manufacturers. And now the Chinese market is very much into EVs, very much into electric cars, and it's being dominated by Chinese manufacturers. And that is a problem for the older car companies. It's very difficult to make the profits they were making, which is one of the reasons that all car prices have been going up left, right, and centre recently. Because if they can push their boundaries on cars, and batteries have been used as a real excuse as well. I mean, I find this really irritating that a battery electric vehicle is £10,000-15,000 more expensive than the equivalent petrol vehicle in a lot of cases, and the battery's blamed for that when battery prices have been falling like anything over 20 years. But that's just one of the things. I mean, it's a way of maintaining profit margins. But yeah, it's interesting. And also, you've also got, so there is a push. I mean, there's pushback by some of the European manufacturers against batteries because of the perceived, what they perceive their customers want. So that they perceive people wanting the noise of a car, they want the sort of the engine technology and all that stuff. And there's definitely a market for that. And I don't see in the future there not being internal combustion engines of some sort. I think they'll probably be limited in the same way steam engines are limited now. I can imagine you having your internal combustion engine rally and all that sort of stuff. And that may be where e-fuels come in. But at the moment, e-fuels, well, even the people proponents of e-fuels are saying that they're going to be very expensive to have. So you're going to have people who can actually afford to have an e-fuel to be too bad. It's not going to be something day-to-day people can have. But that would allow you to have those cars. And then obviously there's always but wait for hydrogen argument, which I think is definitely a fallacy. I think, I mean, the problem with the hydrogen is just transporting it and having it. I mean, if you've got so hydrogen is great for things where you've got somewhere where you can have a hydrogen plant filling what you want the hydrogen plant to fill next door to each other. Otherwise, you run into all sorts of issues with transportation. It's hydrogen leaks through pipes very easily. So it's a small molecule. It gets through things very quickly. It's a lot more difficult to seal things, and there'll be a lot more leaks and the like on that. And there's also a couple of articles about that this week when leaks have occurred. And also it's a lot more difficult to transport than things like petrol is. I mean, I always go back to the petrol strike. Remember when we had all the tankers off the road, and we were trying to find people to drive those tankers. We would have needed a lot more tankers to transport hydrogen than we did with petrol. I can't remember the density level, but it's sort of like maybe four times as many tankers would have been needed to transport the same amount of hydrogen. And it's got to be transported under good conditions. It's got to be kept pressurized. There's a lot of difficulty with actually, and it's why the hydrogen delivery network in the UK is basically closed down. It's been virtually impossible to maintain it. It's been out of production. If you look at the maps for the hydrogen delivery, sort of at the petrol stations where they had them, they've been out of order more times than they've been in order. And that's the challenge. It's a chicken and egg thing. If you want hydrogen vehicles, you need a really good hydrogen supply line. But the problem with hydrogen, it's a complexity you don't actually need, because if you have a fuel cell, it still needs to power a battery. So all these cars all these hydrogen cars are battery electric to some extent anyway. Now there are potential good uses of hydrogen, but they are for very large scale machinery. And if you start looking at some of the big companies recently, the people who make trucks, they've already come out and said that hydrogen is a dead end for them. They can't see how they can make it work efficiently at a cost which is going to be usable for their purchasers. So Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I used to think it was going to be quite a powerful, usable thing for trucks and things like that, but that seems to be a problem. Trains, maybe I could see potentially diesel trains being replaced with hydrogen trains because it's not somewhere you could have a plant at each end of the track and fill them up. Perhaps you wouldn't want a hydrogen plant in the middle of London, though. That might not be.
Yeah, maybe not in in Euston Station, a big hydrogen plant. Yeah.
And e-fuels sound great as well, but they rely on carbon capture, which is not a technique which has not been perfected yet, and is probably as far further off than solid state batteries is. So it's all of this is challenging. It really is.
Yeah.
But we have to do something.
That's it. I did see Goodwood Festival Speed. This is now the only car show, so there was some car launches there, and the car launches were all EVs and all Chinese manufacturers. That was quite interesting. But also it was quite interesting. It was Seb Vettel was there with former Formula One world champion Seb Vettel, and he had Nigel Mansell's 1992 Formula One car, the Williams Renault, running on e-fuel. Because he's got a new campaign around e-fuel. So effectively what he's trying to argue is for things like sport and things like that and old vehicles, there's no need to, you can use these e-fuels, and then that's his idea. He's using this extremely complicated engine from 1992. They said they haven't modified the engine. No, make the fuel to match the engine. Very clever stuff. But he said it's expensive and has specific use cases, like you're saying.
I think that's the thing. I mean, I can definitely see that being. I can still see things like Formula One running on e-fuel type engines, and that would be fine because there would be, in limited quantities, it's possible to make it, and it would be possible to make it carbon neutral. In fact, it might even be carbon positive if some of the capture stuff they can do works out. But it's going to be very expensive. It's not. It's certainly not something you're going to be running every single car on. So we've got to have solutions for that.
Yeah, I actually might see some of this stuff. I'm going to the Silverstone exhibition this week, or the interactive exhibition centre, or whatever they call it. It's a museum to me, but so I'm going to go and have a look at that. But I know that they have a technology section there, so it's going to be quite interesting to see what they've got. I knew they've got a big scale electric as well, which is the original EV, racing EV.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, we all drive scale. I drive a scale electric now. It just feels like that. I'm actually surprised we didn't go that route with brushes and little tracks on the motorways to charge your cars.
Oh, I was forever cleaning the brushes on my scale electric cars. So that's, you can't pick your car up, get the carpet off it, put it back on the track, can you? When you go down the M6, but I was always doing that. So so I'll have to report back next week and let you know how we get on there. It's it looks quite interesting. There is a heritage walk as well, so you can go around the old track as well. So the old bridge corner and where I watched Senna and so on. So I'm going to I'm looking forward to that. So I'll go to that next.
I still love all the. I'm a petrol head at heart anyway. It's just so I love the history. I love all that stuff of Bluebird and all that stuff in the past. I loved all that heart and speed and things. I think it's just we have to find the right balance in that.
Exactly.
And it's possible to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I think I might say I have got something new arriving here, something instrument-based, but arriving next week. But bridges the old and the new world. So if you think 1970s Jean-Michel Jarre, it's that kind of thing. So hopefully I'll have it here to show you next week. I was going to say, where can we find you on Twitter? But we don't find anybody on Twitter anymore, do we?
X. I'm sure on X, but we can't really say that because X is copyrighted by Microsoft and Facebook. So I don't know.
It's a weird thing, isn't it? It's like you load the Twitter app and there's X's on it, but it still says Twitter in other places.
It's Twitter.com still. It's odd.
It seems like a half-baked idea, really, and I'm not sure. Nobody's ever complained that Twitter is got the wrong name, has it? So I mean, I know maybe he knows he knows about branding better than I do. I'm sure he does, but it does seem a bit strange. But so anyway, I am on Twitter or X or wherever it's called, at iStixon. But I am on Threads, and I'm on Instagram and other places. But all the links are on the digitallifestyle.com, so it makes it easier if I just have them all in one place now. So they're all on the top of digitallifestyle.com. Where can we find you?
You can find me at Garry WMA on virtually every platform. I'm on T2, Blue Sky, Fred, on whatever the other one is.
yeah, exactly. So we're all around. Excellent. Well, hopefully Richard has a nice holiday and we can catch up and find out how he got on with his EV, because I think he was a bit suffering from range anxiety, wasn't he, or charge point anxiety. I think we'll find he probably did pretty well out of it, but we'll see for next week.
Yeah, we will see.
Yeah, so we'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll have my new piece of kit to show you off, and so we'll see you next week.
Take care.